Welcome to This Is Real Life with Jen Blossom, where we talk all things that make us most uncomfortable. From abuse to addiction and trauma to recovery, nothing is off limits. My guests and I will expose the parts of ourselves that hold the most pain and share the freedom that is possible. This is real life. Okay, welcome to This Is Real Life with Jen Blossom and my new friend, Cara. She and I met kind of in a support group, actually, because we both come from backgrounds where we've been, emotionally abused by narcissists. So without further ado, Cara, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Cara Buckley. I am an online writer and editor for the website Thread of Truth, where I essentially review movies from the point of view mainly as an abuse victim.
That's awesome. Would you say that's like your creative outlet?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I find that people like us, we really need to have something of our own. Cara's story is interesting because, and I think that if you've listened to my previous podcasts about narcissism and different personality disorders, there are basically different roles that people play within the system of these toxic people. And sometimes those roles change. And so I think that Cara's story is really cool because it kind of gives us examples of how that is. And also it's interesting because Cara was adopted. So if we want to, and I mean, that in itself can be very traumatic. So I guess we can just kind of start there. Cara, you were adopted. How old were you?
I was 11 months old when my mother died.
And your mother
Immediately transferred over into my current family after that.
Right. So I remember from our previous interview that, and you have a brother as well that was also adopted.
Yes.
And how old is he?
He was
How
two
old
and a
was
half.
he? He was 2.5. So he would have. Does he have any memories of your mother?
Images
Biological.
more than memories.
Got it. So from our conversations before, your mother, she passed of breast cancer. Your biological mother did when you were 11 months old. And she had a conversation with the woman who adopted you, which was her sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law, yes.
Yeah. And that she would take on you and your brother in addition to her own children, correct?
Yes.
And when your mom passes away, it was interesting because your biological father left as well.
Yes, he did. From the few stories that I've gotten, what he had done was just didn't want to handle the stress and the medical bills and the expense of it all. He didn't really seem to care about the welfare of his family. He just cared about how the illnesses would affect him financially. And one day he decided, I don't have to do this anymore. So he walked away.
Wow. I mean, that in itself is traumatic.
Very traumatic.
Have you seen him or have you ever met him? Did you ever get in contact with him?
I did. I reached out to him about a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Just to meet him. I was more curious about the things that I have in common with him and what I inherited from him
genetically
in
from
terms
him.
of medical and personality. And it turns out that I have more in common with him than I do with most of the family that raised me. It's so bizarre.
So interesting. That is bizarre because you never knew him and he was never a part of your life. And it ends up that you are, that's definitely a awesome case for genetics. So you it starts off though that your stepmother or your adopted mother, who is your um what? Your aunt? It would be your
My aunt by marriage.
aunt by marriage.
Mhm.
She and your uncle never legally adopted you guys because of the Social Security benefits, correct? From your mother?
Yes.
So money, it sounds like, was kind of an issue, but I guess your mom, before she passed, made sure that if you needed anything, that the Social Security would help.
Yeah, of course. She took care of everything before she died. She left a very extensive will, detailing mainly where my brother and I would end up before she died, and just
Got it.
making sure that we would be taken care of.
And then, so what do you remember those early years? Like, how many other kids did they have? Like, what are your? I mean, you obviously didn't even really know. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't know that you're adopted. You're just like little running around, right? Like,
Yeah.
were those good times? Were those like what are your memories from your early childhood?
For the most part, they were good. I can't remember a time where I didn't know I was adopted. The reveal of that must have been so early. I have no memory of it. I just always
Interesting.
knew I was adopted, and that my mother had died from breast cancer. That was never kept from me.
Okay,
Um,
but they had
oh,
other children, correct?
oh yeah, I was one of seven.
One of
Big
seven. Okay,
family.
and
Big
then
family.
yeah, I right, and so and your adopted mother and father were actually a part of the church,
Yeah, they were both pastors.
which
And
makes sense to me why it was so important that you would continue to get the Social Security benefits because, you're not making a ton of money if you're both pastors and you have
oh
7 kids,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, it's
Um,
kind of a miracle how large pastoral families even make it through.
it is. It's
Because you would
crazy.
think that, yeah, it just wouldn't be possible. It's so bizarre.
So growing up, you guys had a normal childhood? Were all the kids happy? Like all 7 of you were happy-go-lucky, easy, everything was hunky-dory, perfect?
Not perfect, but in my mind, since I didn't know what was really going on at the time, I just
Right.
thought of it as I attributed it to other things. Middle child, which I was, pastor's kid. Money was always tight and stressful. My parents fought a lot.
I
Um,
mean, well, and that would be confusing.
yeah.
I was a pastor's kid, so it's confusing to see your parents fight and then at the same
Mhm.
time go preach like forgiveness and compassion and
Oh gosh,
peace and
yeah.
joy, right?
Of course, of course.
Um,
Um,
and then what are your memories of your brothers and sisters? Did you guys get along as as kids when you guys were little?
yeah, yeah. I did feel a lot like the outsider. I was left out of a lot of things. Um,
Mhm.
it wasn't. Mom used to say it was a matter of safety that we couldn't go too far away from the house. But there were times when, the other kids would, and I would be left behind. So that was often very
So you
confusing
were
for
the
me.
one who was always following the directions.
Yeah.
Sounds like you were really trying your best to please her.
Yeah, yeah. I just didn't want to be a burden because with that initial trauma,
Mhm.
it was always in the back of my mind, who's going to leave me next because I was a financial burden, you know. That was
I mean,
the,
to even think that I
yeah,
mean, my heart breaks for that little girl in you because to just feel like a burden is an awful feeling. I mean, I can see how you would just try to be the perfect kid, never wanting to give anyone a reason to leave.
yeah,
Yeah, which is very common in cases of child abuse and neglect is the child just behaves the best they can, assuming that it's their behavior that triggers the abuse when in actuality the parents' craziness, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next thing that we wanted to get to was the fact that your pastor mom and pastor dad actually ends up getting a divorce.
Yeah. That was my freshman year of high school. I was 14. And then one day, just mom rounded up all of the minor kids in the house and sat us down took us to another friend's house who was also a pastor, kind of sat us down and explained to us with that friend that they were getting a divorce and that it was her goal and her mission to make sure that we all stay together. And that was kind of the beginning of the more obvious and disturbing attributes of our relationship, this cultish idea of family coming first. And that's
Mm.
kind of where it began with the divorce. Dad was leaving. My second father in my life was leaving. I didn't really know why. And all I knew is what I was being told, which was that we all had to fight to stay together.
Mhm. And would you have rather gone with him?
I sometimes think back and wonder, um,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think I would have rather stayed still, because then at least then I would have, stayed with my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
No
Did you ever find out why they divorced? Why she was so adamant about leaving him?
money.
Money.
It always
Wow,
revolves
that's
back to money.
okay, and do you believe that? I mean, that's so interesting that all of a sudden it's like she's had enough and the money issues are more important than her, like,
Hmm.
promise to marriage.
Yeah, yeah.
As an adult, who's been through a lot of therapy, I can now look back at somebody who decides one day that money is more important than her commitment to her husband and her family, that would be like a character flaw. That would be like an initial, like, that doesn't sound right for somebody. So for me, I'm thinking, well, what else was going on? Like, um, or was she just so far into her own delusions that she decides that she doesn't want to be with him? You know what I'm saying? Have you ever really thought about that?
I have. Um, I I don't have a lot of information, and that's kind of my problem. It's hard to really come up with ideas of what really happened without enough information. So I'm just going off of what I've heard them both say later on.
Right.
And the only commonality between the reason they divorced was money. So
Interesting.
different
Yeah,
stories,
that
but
sounds
just,
crazy.
that one commonality. It's some,
I
yeah,
mean, for her to I mean, we talked about how she literally annihilated him,
yeah,
right? Like,
hmm,
emotionally, she just murdered his, like, soul, his joy, his
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Um, it's so interesting that she would do that over money. Like, it sounds like she had such disgust for him, such, you know, that she would do that. I just wonder what else was going on. That's something to definitely chat about in therapy. I know that you're currently in therapy too, which is amazing. And I think that so much healing will come from that.
I hope so.
Um, yeah. Well, I mean, and it's really sad because, well, I think we'll get to that later, but, he moved away and now you're stuck with this woman
Hmm.
who, isn't the nicest lady, and I also want to just kind of remind you that it's hard to trust your own intuition when you've been made to question it your whole life.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
a lot of things are hard to come to conclusion with because there are just certain things you don't want to believe and certain things that you've blocked out and certain dissociations and that
oh
kind of
yeah,
thing.
for
So,
sure.
I think that everything will get
Hmm.
clearer, but I'm really happy that you've decided to share your
Yeah,
story with all of us so that we can kind of get a better look at someone's life like this. So, okay, so we are now in senior year of high school, and the Social Security dries up.
Yeah.
So now you're 18, and I wonder what your mom's going to do now if finances is such a big deal.
Well, between 18 and graduation, there was about a 4-month gap because I turned 18 in February, graduation was in June. It didn't so much dry up as it went directly to me because I was an adult, but since I was still in high school, it was going to continue until I graduated. So I had 4 months worth of Social Security benefits that were coming directly to me. And I was trying to save that because college was coming up and I needed money. So,
And she didn't like that.
well, she was on board. I don't think she had much of a choice. But that was around the time where she started putting me into therapy, and just kind of this idea sprang up in her mind, like, what else can I do to get another source of finance out of this adopted child? So what she did was decided the easiest diagnosis to do to put on me was Asperger's. So she started taking me to a psychiatrist to kind of manipulate a diagnosis out of him, put me on medication I didn't need so she would get a paper trail going where she could eventually start collecting disability in my name. And so between that February and that June, I was kind of the victim of this onslaught of her obsession, and she was tearing me down every chance she could, just trying to convince me this is wrong with you. This has to be wrong with
And
you.
had she ever mentioned that she thought that there were issues with you
Oh,
before
no,
this?
no. It was so sudden, it just caught me completely off guard, which is why it was so easy for me to question it. Just
Okay, and then my other question is this. Were there anybody of the 7, right, who of the 7 kids who was mistreated by her, or was everybody treated so beautifully by her?
um I did see her treating her other children very awfully. It's a lot of the mistreatment of my other siblings happened before she targeted me. So like kind of throughout my childhood, there would be these stages of where she would just kind of target one of the children until she came up with another reason to target another. And by the time I turned 18, I guess it was just my turn.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, especially because you were one of the youngest,
Yeah.
right?
And I was just so
Right,
afraid
so
of
at
her
that point,
and
they're
her anger.
well, and they probably weren't all living at the house
Mhm.
anymore, so
Yeah.
they weren't, like,
Oh, yeah.
as easily accessible.
By the time I turned 18, it
Ugh,
was just me, my younger sister, and my younger brother. The other four were out.
yeah, they wanted to get
Oh, I'm
out,
sure they
which
did.
is so typical of abusive
Hmm.
families, is that once the child turns 18, they're out of there. But that's the sad part, is that then the smaller ones become the
Yeah.
victims. So then she started going crazy and making sure that she could prove that you were mentally
Hmm.
unstable, and that you shouldn't get a driver's license. And you mentioned she didn't even want you to go to college because, I mean, if you left and you were able to drive, you could get
Yeah.
away. Um, so that was her way of
And it
controlling,
would also
which
wouldn't
is
look good for a case if I had graduated college and I was a safe and capable driver. That doesn't look good for
right.
her.
That's right. So on our timeline, it talks about how you did actually reconnect with your father
Yes, yes.
during
During
college.
college, And to
with
specify,
your
my
adoptive
adoptive
father.
father during college, because
Yeah.
he was living in Southern Oregon at the time, and my college was in Northern California. So we were only a few hours away from each other.
So had you not spoken to him since he
Off
left?
and on, only when mom would allow it,
Okay.
just kind of on the
I
phone,
see.
but we were mainly alienated from him until I turned 18, and it was my choice to reconnect.
Got it. And so how was it when you reconnected?
Yes, it was my relationship with him became better than I'd ever had with him before. I think because he
Isn't
was
that
under a lot of
interesting?
pressure, being married to my mom and just kind of being her, um, not just her enabler, but kind of her advocate. So, with that
Yeah.
dynamic out of the way, I could actually see my dad for the first time, like who his best self.
Mhm. Yeah. And what was his best self? Like he did what was he doing at the time? Like was he behaving like more
Oh, yeah, he
freely?
was,
Was he
yeah, he
happier? Like
was completely free. He was just involved in so many great projects in Oregon. Um, he wasn't preaching anymore. I think he had lost his ordainment during mom's kind of attack on him during the divorce
Mhm.
because she went after him in other legal ways. But
Mm.
he was still working really hard and doing what he loved. He was a lot happier, a lot more engaged, and he was never judgmental. He was always open and accepting and loving.
Mm.
And that was a side of
Would
him
you
I
say
don't
that
think I'd ever seen before.
yeah, isn't that interesting? I remember, my father doing the same thing. There was parts of him that were so kind and compassionate,
Hmm.
but it was never when she was
Yeah.
around. When she was around, it was like he had to be stoic and hate us as much as she did.
Yeah.
It's
It's
awful,
awful.
it's awful,
Yeah.
but it's true. Yeah. But you did
I
graduate
did.
and
I'm
you
actually the
you
only one out of the
completely
seven to graduate in the traditional 4-year time span. All the others took longer. I think I worked harder
yeah,
because I had something to prove.
yeah, totally. So did she ever get the disability? Did that ever work out for
No,
her?
I wouldn't let her.
Okay.
There's no way.
Oh
She
my
hated
gosh.
me for
So
resisting her.
I'm sure she did. I wonder who became her next, victim
Uh,
as you
I
grew up.
think it was my younger sister after I left for college. I think she turned her eyes
So
on
sad.
who later became the golden child and remained the golden child until she died.
Yeah.
But
Gosh,
yeah,
that's how it
yeah,
happens. Everybody
yeah,
plays a role. So you you did get your
I
driver's
did,
license, you graduated
I did.
college, you unfortunately struggled to get a job because the economy was
Yeah, I
awful.
graduated in 2008 just as the economy crashed, and there were no jobs for
Right.
college graduates with no experience. The culture
Yeah, that was
changed.
rough, man.
And unless you know
Totally.
someone or you have the experience, you can't get a job.
Right. And interestingly enough, your mom also had some, financial struggles at the
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yeah, she got involved in a pyramid scheme. That company
Mm.
went bankrupt. She went bankrupt, lost her house. And of course, she quit a good, stable job in order to be a part of this pyramid scheme. So she didn't have a backup income or any of the old
Man,
benefits.
money was her
Yeah.
crutch, man. It sounds like all
Yeah.
she cared about was
Yeah. She
money.
saw this
And then at the end
business structure, which looked amazing to her, of course. Any person with common sense knows if you avoid pyramid schemes, they never,
Mhm.
they're not stable structures. But all she saw was the potential for
Yeah,
for money.
she
Yeah.
got hook, line, and sinker
Yeah.
right there. Um, but at that time, why did she start promising you legal adoption?
I don't know why she promised. I think she knew I resented her for it, so she would just throw me an occasional promise just to make sure I wouldn't get too upset that I would start telling people about it, because that's a
Right.
narcissist like biggest fear. It's their primary fear, exposure. And I wasn't afraid to tell
100%.
people what was going on with me.
Right. Well, here we are.
Yeah,
Here we are
yeah,
now. Oh yeah, they do not like people seeing them for who they
yeah.
are, and they will trash talk you until the day is over,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they will not stop. It's called a smear
Uh-huh.
campaign,
Yeah.
where they literally find if you say one little thing or start to expose them, they will go crazy trying to make you look out to be the crazy
Oh
one.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so okay, so you did you move back home then to help her because she didn't have a job, like she was homeless? Like what happened at
Well, at
that
that
point?
point, I had nowhere else to go because I couldn't get a job. I had all these student loans I would eventually have to start paying back. So, like,
Right.
I really didn't have another option. Of course, she was thrilled about it because here's his, again, quote unquote, mentally challenged daughter who can't even get a job.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
can't she get a job?
Yep.
She's not trying hard enough. Something's wrong with her.
Mhm.
And that's what she was
So
telling
at
people
that
behind
point
my back. She turned all my siblings
yeah.
against me.
Yeah, they love to do that.
Hmm.
Um, but you did connect at that point with an old college
Oh yeah,
friend
we
and
never got remain. Gosh, I'm out of words. We were never out of contact. I just just stayed in contact with him. He was like the one person who really listened and believed me and
mm,
cared. So it
he
was,
was like that one he's like your angel, the one who heard you and listened to you and validated you and loved on you, and
yeah,
it sounds to me like he really
he was
is.
really easy to talk to.
Yeah. And you became engaged.
Yeah, he was really worried. So he agreed maybe a marriage would be the best way to pull me out in a legal way. Um, and just he would find a way to take care of me himself.
That's definitely a a love, a deep, deep love that is amazing and incredible, and I'm so grateful that you had someone like him.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so you guys, got engaged, and at that point, unfortunately, I think that when you became engaged and your mother found
Hmm.
out that, she would no longer have control over you, there was this event in your life that you call the great betrayal. And it makes sense to me that it would happen now after you finally gotten, you know,
Yeah,
a commitment that you would no longer be hers to
yeah.
torture. So what was that event?
Well, it was ties into the biggest regret of my life, which was family Christmas, because when family comes first, you have to attend family events. There is no saying no. So when
Got
I
it.
had left my dad's house to attend this event, that was when I had announced I was engaged, and they became desperate. That was like their scramble to keep control and to make sure that I wasn't talking. So
Mhm.
they dug in, they hacked my Facebook page first and read all of the exchanges I was having with my husband. And
Mm.
then they found my journal and they read it through, like all the way through. So I had,
Yeah, and
so yeah,
it doesn't sound like they loved everything you wrote about.
no, because I wasn't holding back in my journal. I had learned,
Right.
I think I started journaling back in high school. I think when I was a junior or senior, because paper doesn't talk back, and everyone else did. So it was just one way I could easily and safely express myself, or at least I thought it was safe.
Yeah. But it wasn't, because then your mother went and showed everybody your
They took
journal,
the
and then
journal,
it
they drove
became,
around to everyone in the family in like 100-mile radius, showed it to them, and then they called other family members and talked to them about it. And the next day, they were driving me to a mental facility to have me committed, because
yeah, that sounds
I don't know if they really
so
saw it that
painful.
way or if they were just trying to twist it that way, but they thought I was dangerous because of what I wrote.
Well, what I do know about a narcissist is the other people have to play her
Mm,
game, or they become the next scapegoat. So at that point, all the brothers and sisters felt safe because you were the target, which meant they had to go along with it so that mom wouldn't get on their
mm.
case, right? It became like, let's gang up. So, um, but were you committed?
No, they laughed me out
Mm.
of there. I even showed them the journal, and they read it through, and they read my words and how I felt, and she flat out told me, "I'll never forget it. Sounds like your mom is the one with the problem." And they laughed me out of there.
Yeah.
And by the end of the
Yeah.
day, I was on a bus home, and I was determined never to go back again.
So where you say bus home, where was that?
Home at the time before the wedding, and I would move in with my husband, was with my dad in Oregon.
Got it.
Hmm.
Um, but your mom didn't stop torturing you then, because she started using your name
Mm.
to buy things,
Oh,
correct?
well, that was kind of coinciding with what had happened before my engagement, actually. There was a credit card in my name. I lent it to
Mm.
her once on the promise that she would pay me back so she could buy a plane ticket to visit her golden child in Africa. Um, but when I got the bill, like a whole lot of other purchases had been made, like unnecessary purchases that I didn't agree to. And even still, on the promise that she would pay me back, and I only got maybe half of that balance out of her over a period of time. And then after
Mhm.
the great betrayal, and I was completely ostracized, she didn't feel the need to really pay me back any more of that. So that card went to collection, and I had nowhere to pay it
It's
back.
crazy how um it's so interesting that she would borrow your
Hmm.
money and not the money of any of the other
Yeah,
kids.
because
Yeah.
you don't say no to a narcissist. If you
Oh,
say no to a
right. Well, if you do,
narcissist,
there's hell to pay.
you
Yep,
incur
there's hell
like
to
the
pay.
wrath of Zeus.
100%. So well, tell me about your wedding, because that was, oh my gosh, your your anniversary is in
It
2
is.
days.
Yes, it is.
Oh my
9 years.
gosh, happy
Thank you.
anniversary. But yeah, so you got married in
Hmm.
2011 and the whole family attended?
They essentially paid for the whole thing. It was the weirdest thing. It was like they kind of knew. I think deep down they knew. My husband and I wanted to just get married in a courthouse, make it real cheap, get it over with, and just start our married life. They didn't want that. So they offered to pay for the whole thing, plan the whole thing, and all we had to do was
Mm,
show
that
up.
sounds like that sounds like a control thing,
I,
right? Like, I'm
yeah,
gonna pay for it, but I'm gonna plan it.
well, I didn't really care. I didn't care about any of the plans because at the end of the day, I just wanted to be married. I wasn't picky.
Who was this, a big wedding?
No,
Like, who all showed
not,
up? Her
no,
friends?
not really. I did have control over the guest list, although she she did criticize me for it because I didn't invite enough people. I wanted to keep it small. I did get a lot of fight back on the things I did have control over, but I wasn't really backing down and I didn't really care. So, yeah, but they still paid for it. My oldest brother cooked. My golden child sister baked the cake. Um, yeah,
Wow.
my older sister, she paid for the tables and chairs. Just everyone
Wow.
pitched
I
in a
wonder
little
why.
bit. We got married in my
Interesting.
uncle's backyard. So we kept it cheap
Okay.
and, love.
But was it a good
It
day?
was.
I mean, was that
It the day of the wedding was basically more for her than for me. She wanted to put on a
right?
show. Let's be honest, she put on a
Yes.
show. She actually initiated. So the whole thing was really more about her, and I could tell by her speech that she wanted to make it about her. But
Oh, yes.
mhm, it was a
Mhm.
show, and she wanted to show
Yep.
the world that in spite of
That
everything,
she was a good
that
mom.
she was
Yep.
supportive of our marriage and she was a good mom and she just, you know, um, wanted
Yep.
to welcome my husband into the family. Yeah.
Which he was like, "Get me out of here."
Yeah, yeah. I was like,
It's like, I don't wanna be a
whatever. I was married by the end of the
yeah.
day and things would change. That's all I cared about.
And so you got married
Uh-huh,
and you moved in with your
uh-huh.
husband and,
Yeah,
um, I would have to assume that it was great to be
yeah.
away.
I was making a lot of new friends. I got a job probably within 4 months. So it was great
Mhm.
to have a job. It was so great to
Yeah.
have a job finally, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and especially because it's like this woman who's telling you all the things that you are
Hmm.
and to actually be able to say, "Actually, I'm not those
Yeah.
things,"
I,
and I am capable,
mhm.
and I'm sure that was
Everything I
so
did,
awesome for
everything
your
I
self-esteem.
accomplished was to prove her wrong. I was determined.
Yeah. Um, okay, and so in February of 17, mom dies.
Yeah. Yeah. We were all prepared for it. She had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She lasted about a year, which is expected for that kind of cancer. She actually lasted longer than a lot of people. I think she was being stubborn. But
Was there any reconciliation between you and her or between you and the siblings or anything while throughout that year?
by then, she had shunned my biological brother over an incident that didn't happen the way she said it happened. Um, my brother stood up for himself. She didn't like that. So she basically utterly disowned him, his wife, and his child. Of course, I wasn't going to stand for that. He was my brother. So I stayed in contact no
Yeah.
matter how hard the others tried to tell me not to. And
Yeah.
when he was the last one to hear that she was sick because she basically ordered everyone not to tell him. She didn't want him involved. But
Got it.
I was going to tell him anyway, but someone beat me to it. So
Yeah.
he found out. He flew or drove from Texas to California to face her. And
Wow.
the house she was staying at the time, she left when she heard he was coming. She left that house and went to another house. He followed her. He wasn't going to let her essentially die without them talking. So
Right.
he was determined, I think, because he had already been through a mother who had died of cancer and he didn't want to leave it that way.
Yeah. So how did that conversation
I
go?
don't know. It happened between him and her, so nobody knows.
Right.
And he doesn't talk
Oh.
about it. She wouldn't talk about it, but it did end in them reconciling as much as a narcissist can reconcile. So he was kind of invited back into the family, kind of back into the fold. Of course, to me, he was never out of the fold. But
Right.
at least I wouldn't be ordered not to talk about him or my niece. So it was nice that that stopped.
Okay. And then when, she passed away
Mhm.
and, things started to become more clear because once you're kind of out of the crazy washing machine of chaos, when it stops, then you can actually kind of see things for what they are. What is it, that you've learned? So I know that in 2019, it was like, that was like really kind of an eye opening year for you. That's the year that you got in contact with your biological father.
Mhm.
Um,
Um,
Good.
yeah, I had been knowledgeable about the narcissism, I think, since 2016. I was actually stumbled on a Dr. Phil episode. It happened to be playing when I was in the room, and I just kind of got enthralled in this idea of a mother who thinks she's never wrong. I had never
Mm.
heard of narcissism before that. So I started studying
Yeah.
that. So I knew before she died that she was a narcissist, and I was kind of collecting data. 2019 was significant also, because, like you mentioned, I did get in contact with my biological father, and I also took what is called the Myers-Briggs test, which is how you
Mhm.
figure out your personality. And I
Mhm.
tested, actually took it twice. I tested INTJ, which is a rare personality. It's more logical than emotional, which makes sense for me. But looking
Mhm.
back, I realized there was nothing wrong with me simply because I have this personality. They were looking at who I was and just deciding I was wrong from birth.
Mm.
I never had a
Yeah, that sounds
chance
very painful.
because I shared a personality with my biological father, someone they hated and
Mhm.
someone who did something terrible. And they just
Right.
associated me with that.
Yeah. Um, and so you now, you have your thread of truth and you've definitely kind of gotten into
Mhm.
therapy more and really trying to heal those wounds that were inflicted on you as a child. Um, is there anything else that you wanted to say? I mean, this is your platform. This is your story. This is the story that continues, that doesn't end today, that, keeps going. Like, is there anything else like you want to say? Anything else, any dreams that you have? Um, the hope you have for people that are listening. Is there anything that you wanted to say kind of to conclude this?
I do want to say to my fellow victims, you're not alone. You're
Hmm.
not alone. They try to make you feel alone and helpless. You're not. You gotta
That's
just
right.
go out there and find that community because we are here for each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Just being on that,
It's a beautiful
yeah.
thing when people start talking because, here's the thing, Kara, if you didn't speak, then no one would
Mhm.
know. And the secrets keep getting buried deeper and deeper. And so when you use your voice to speak truth, you are allowing other people to do the same and offering them hope
Mhm.
that they too can get out of it.
Yeah.
Um, so hope for the listener. And then, this is a big, big, big day for you to share this because this is not something that you've shared with a lot of people. How are you feeling after saying all this and knowing that it will be, broadcast?
It's empowering. I finally
Mm.
have my turn to speak after years
Yeah.
of being silenced. So,
Well, I am like ridiculously proud of
yeah.
you. I'm so dang proud of you. You have come so far, and there is such a long, exciting future for you. And I'm grateful that you decided to share. And my hope is that others will hear this and want to share too, and can kind of create this community of people who are talking about this this crazy thing of growing up with the devil really in your house.
Yeah.
The more we talk about it, the more people start to understand. I also very much agree with you when we talk about narcissism, that it's definitely not what we all thought. I remember growing up and reading Greek mythology, and there was like narcissism, and it was someone just who really enjoyed the look of themselves.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
what we're talking about here. And that's the confusing part. So anyways, you know what, Cara, I'm just grateful for you, and I can't wait for everybody to hear your story. And I can't wait to, re-record in a year and hear what other things that you've done, and 2 years and 3 years, and how you've taken this awful, painful experience of the first half of or fourth of your life. I don't know how old you are, but that
Yeah.
you are going to be able to live free and live in truth. And for that, I am grateful. So it was so nice chatting with you. And I hope that when you listen to this, you are proud of yourself too.
I hope so.